Welcome to another edition of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at KU.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cheers to Careers. This is our number 105th episode. I'm joined today by KU alum Mark McCormick, author, consultant, and freelance writer. Welcome, Mark.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Another reason why I wanted to have you on this time of year, in 2 weeks, you're going to be inducted in the Kansas Press Association Newspaper Hall of Fame. Congrats. What was your reaction when you got that call that you're going to be in the Hall of Fame?
It was humbling. I know that people say that all the time. It was humbling. They sent me, the people who nominated me sent me the letter.
Okay.
And to me, the letter was as great as I think the induction will actually be. And I also felt sheepish because I feel like I've had a good career, but I was thinking about people who had poured into me, like Samuel Adams. Sam's not in there, and a few other people, you know, that I just absolutely adored. But Sam was like a dad to me, and I think it was Lady Bird Johnson called him once to tell him that she thought that he had won the Pulitzer, but he was a finalist. But he had done some incredible work, a tour through the South when they passed the accommodations law, and he was just testing to see if it really had teeth. He's mentioned in the Congressional Record as helping to start the war on hunger. And, I'm proud of my career, but I can't hold a candle to Sam. And so it sent me thinking about Sam and, my parents. My parents are not around anymore, how much they would have enjoyed seeing it. But it's an incredible honor. And I don't go around chirping about it because I think if you get a crown, you gotta carry that crown. And so I take that seriously.
And I know you started, I know you worked at the UDK, but your career I think started in Louisville for a few years before you returned to your hometown, Wichita Eagle. So was it about close to 20 years where you were working full-time in newspapers and then you kind of transitioned more to leadership?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
My first job was actually, I was told that I would be hired by the Reno Gazette-Journal. And they offered me a job after my first week there. They said, we don't want you thinking about where you're gonna work when you graduate. We want you to come here. And then I did another internship in Louisville, and I ended up liking that. They ended up liking me, and so I ended up going there. But my first job offer was in Reno, and then I was in Reno for 5 years, and part of that I covered religion, which was a really important beat there.
In Reno or Louisville?
In Louisville.
Louisville.
Louisville's the first inland diocese of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
It's an equal number of Catholics and Protestants. There was a Baha'i community, a Jewish community. The Nation of Islam was there, so there was all this history about Muhammad Ali there and him joining that organization. So it was a great place to be a religion writer, but I had a chance to move home. I was, every time I visited my parents, they looked a little smaller, they were moving a little slower, and I was feeling guilty about not being there to fetch and carry for them.
And you did a lot with Eagle. I mean, writer, editor, columnist. What did you most enjoy about that job?
My columnist job.
Columnist?
Yeah, I think that might be the best job I've ever had. It wasn't the one that paid the most, but after struggling, I feel like at the beginning, I wasn't really happy with the stuff that I was writing, and but man, after I got my legs under me, I really enjoyed that, and I was breaking news in my column, and it was a reported column. It wasn't just my musings, and I was really proud of things that happened as a result of what I was actually writing. And it mattered that people who knew me growing up were there and could read me, daily. And I made a practice of visiting my high school journalism teacher's class. I did that for 20 years.
Oh, wow. So I would think growing up in Wichita, was that always in the back of your mind, hey, someday I do want to be a writer, editor, columnist for the Wichita Eagle? Or
yeah, I don't know if you know this, but my sister was a student here.
Okay.
In 1971, she was the high school journalist of the year in Wichita. And she won this award. I have a picture of her standing outside of a plane. She was actually flown up here from Wichita.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? And she was like another mom to me. And she passed away last year. But when she moved away, she would write us letters, and I'd sit on the floor, my mother would be reading those letters. And I remember being small and thinking, I'd like to write like that someday. And she was really the inspiration for my career, my inspiration for coming here, and a big part of the reason that I serve on the Board of Trustees. Because I feel like I owe the school so much because of, you know, Sam Adams, that I call Daddy Sam, and Suzanne Shaw, call Mama Shaw. And so much of what I have and who I am, I really owe to the school. And so I'd like serving on the trustee board because I have a sense that I'm giving back.
How long have you been with the William Allen White trustee board?
Oh my gosh.
I've been here 10 years, and I think you've been on at least
Yeah, about 10 years.
that long. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you're involved in a lot of, I think I saw you're also, you were involved in William Allen White documentary, a Gordon Parks documentary. What is it about being involved in those kind of projects that really motivates you?
You know, my dad was a big history person. And not like world history or American history, it was our family history. And I grew up listening to him talk about how his dad, my grandfather, was one of 29 kids. How harrowing it was to try and escape Alabama in that era. To arrive at the Sac and Fox reservation, you know, seeking safety. So I always had this kind of thing about history and wanting to write about history. And over time, I ended up helping the previous executive directors of the Kansas African American Museum with African American history. And then I had a mentor there, an architect named Charles McAfee, nationally famous architect, who, you know, gave me a lot of incredible stories about how, for instance, have you ever heard of the Double V campaign of World War II?
No, not.
It was started essentially in Wichita when it was like about a few months after D-Day. A cafeteria worker at one of the aircraft plants wrote a letter to the Pittsburgh Courier, and the Pittsburgh Courier was a nationally circulating African American newspaper. And he wrote this powerful letter that's saying, you know, why would we fight to be half free? We want victory abroad as well as at home, thus the Double V. And it became a national campaign. People had Double V gardens, Double V double-header baseball games, parades, the whole thing. But it essentially started in Wichita. So I had this connection to history, and I think it was a pretty interesting and a much easier transition to start running a museum, even though I had no museum training. But it was an easier transition to lead an organization that had history as a part of its charge.
So I know back in the 80s, we always had those 3x3s. Was history one of your 3x3s? Or what were your 3x3s?
Yeah, it was history,
Yeah.
political science, and sociology.
Okay, because I had history, political science, and
But I
English
was,
in my 3x3.
but I was also 3 hours. I didn't realize this at the time, but I was 3 hours away from a minor in African and African American studies. So at some point, I plan to take the 3 hours
That minor.
and have a minor. Yeah.
So, you know, your combination of journalism and history, I would assume you kind of touched on this, really played a big role in those leadership positions you had, like with the Kansas Leadership Center, Kansas African American Museum, ACLU of Kansas, and then with the Kansas Black Leadership Council. Did those all kind of weave together, the journalism and history, and then did those organizations seek out you, or did you seek out those organizations?
Most of the time, I was sought out.
Sought out.
And it wasn't intentional that I ended up in those places necessarily. It was hard for me to imagine, you know, as my local newspaper began to shrink, it was hard for me to imagine doing anything else. I still, in a lot of ways, grieve my daily journalism career. But it was, but I had some great opportunities to serve, and to serve in ways that journalism didn't allow me to serve. You know, writing is one thing, but you know, outside of journalism, a lot of corporations appreciate journalists.
Right.
Think fast on their feet, good with deadlines, write well, communicate well, pretty organized. So I was able to use, you know, aspects of what I'd learned here in pushing, you know, for a lot of these other institutions and for those causes. I was always a person who I considered myself a juror in the court of last resort, particularly when I was a columnist. And people who didn't have a voice would call, and then they you know, I have nowhere else to turn. And essentially, there were times where I was able to help, and journalism was done.
Yeah, no, that's always definitely a lot of rewarding
Yeah.
aspects of journalism. That's definitely one of them. I know you've written a few books. How was that transition from journalist to author? Was that a pretty smooth transition, or is that something you always want to do, write some books?
Well, I mean,
And I guess you are actually writing right now too, yeah.
I mean, I'll you know, I'll confess here that it sounds a lot more romantic than it actually was. So, gosh, what was it? Early 2000s, late 1990s. My friend Barry Sanders, a year previous, had actually shared with me that he was thinking of retiring. And I listened, but it was just hard for me to wrap my mind around it. And then he called and said, "Hey, I'm going to retire, and I want you to release this news." And so I was under tremendous pressure inside the newsroom to give the story to the Detroit paper, which I didn't want to do, because I had made a promise to my friend that this is how I would do it. And then years later, I was running the team that covered courts and cops. And it took a while to get a publisher to bite on Barry's book. There were people who actually weren't sure that Barry was going to be a Hall of Famer, which was strange to me, right?
Yeah,
So,
1990,
so I'm rambling a little bit, but I was the crime and safety team leader. I'd asked for time off. They said, "We really can't afford to have you gone." So I essentially had to write that book in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And with no time off. So, and as luck would have it, every night there was some kind of standoff, and I could not leave the newsroom until the standoff or the fire or whatever had been resolved. So I was getting home, you know, at 9 or 10. My son was still a little baby, and he slept on the couch next to me while I typed. And he'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd make a bottle, change his diaper, go back, and I did that for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So in publishing, they call it crashing a book, because you're driving so fast, you're going to crash. So, I mean, it sounds great now that I had done this book, but at the time, I was tired, and I was lucky that my son came home sleeping through the night. But it was a great experience, but it's not something I'd want to do over again.
Now, yeah, I remember that. I think like right before training camp '99. I don't know if I got my story right, but he actually faxed his retirement. I don't know if it was a press release. Was it addressed to you, or did you sit there waiting on the fax machine, or did they say, "Hey, Mark, you might want to read this"?
No, it's funny.
How'd that come about?
I still have the fax, and we used a pseudonym for him, capital B period Abernathy, and so that was what was coming back and forth on the fax machine, B Abernathy, as I was tweaking it, and he was tweaking it, and his agent was tweaking it. But yeah, he faxed it to us.
In that book, I know you did an update to it, and that was kind of the foundation for that documentary, right? The Bye Bye Barry. I mean, that kind of led to that documentary. But how involved were you in that process, the documentary?
I was involved pretty much in both of them.
Both of them.
Barry's agent, he has a fantastic agent, a guy named J.B. Bernstein. And he was like, Mark, you were really the only person who could have done that book in 2 weeks because the two of you are so close. And it did work well. There were a lot of stories that I knew. But what was interesting was the times that we spent an entire weekend together talking, and I was taking notes. And there were things that my friend was going through that I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of the stress that he was under. I wasn't aware that he was being pressured to go to one school over another. And it did bother him that there were only 3 schools, I think, trying to recruit him. Tulsa, Iowa State, and
Oklahoma State.
well, eventually Oklahoma
Yeah.
State.
I don't think any of the Kansas schools.
No.
Or KU State wasn't.
Wichita State actually had a team at the time, and
think it
they
was
were like,
last year.
no, yeah.
So when, building that trust with sources, obviously you built up tremendous trust with Barry. Did that start at a pretty young age? I mean, just growing up with him, and he knew your interest in journalism, or how did that?
Well, we were always pretty good friends.
Good
we
friends.
grew up, I met him on the kindergarten bus.
Oh, wow.
And, we did lots of stuff together all the time. We were riding bikes all the time. And he liked to fix bikes and things like that. So the turning point, however, was during the Heisman season. And there were people waiting on him as he was walking off the practice field. People who wanted to represent him. People were pulling him in all these different directions. And he called me up here and said, hey man, do you think you could come down and just hang out for a few days? And I went down there and hung out for a few days, and he just seemed relieved. And I was kind of a buffer in a way, but I think that's why our friendship has endured, because when he needed me, I told him that the only thing that was going to beat me there was the front end of my car. And when I've needed him, he was the same way. He said, the only thing that's going to beat me there, Mark, is the front end, the nose of this plane. So over the years when I've run certain organizations and there were these fundraising needs, I never asked. That I felt like our friendship meant so much more than to cheapen it that way. And it was frustrating for a lot of people who wanted me to go in that direction. We did honor him at my museum, but that was us honoring him.
Nice. So when you were a KU student, UDK, what was kind of your beat at the UDK? Or did you have multiple beats?
Yeah, I had multiple beats. I wrote a little bit of sports. I covered the tennis team primarily, and then I was kind of a GA. There was a place here, a club here called the Mad Hatter, and they had this kind of weird admittance policy that I was writing about at the time. I wrote about radon. I had never heard of radon, but I was doing stories like that. And then at one point I was on the editorial board, but I left the editorial board because I was so involved in a lot of the student protests on campus, and I just didn't think it was appropriate for me to be on the editorial board and doing that. So I was really involved in that as well.
And then after KU, Louisville?
Yeah.
Okay. What advice do you have to, say, the current group of UDK students or anybody that wants to do what you want to do professionally, like for the class of 26? What should they know?
I don't feel like I should be giving people advice because I was holding on to my career, white knuckles the whole time, and like I told you before, I really miss it. But there are things that you're going to learn here that have wide application. For example, my big brother was a big energy exec. He was a lawyer. He just retired. And I remember him telling me, he was encouraging me to go to law school, and he said, Mark, the people who are finishing at the top of my law class were journalism undergrads because of all the writing, because of all the research. It has an application there. And generally, like I have felt that in the corporate world, there was more respect for my skill set and what I had to offer than I had in some of my early journalism career.
No, well, one of my podcast guests right before you joined us started out in journalism, and she's in law, and she talked about the research and deadline, just writing clearly, and no, that's tremendous advice. Okay, Mark, before you go, I like to close with a fast five. You talk about knowing Barry Sanders since you were in kindergarten. Did you ever beat Barry in a race? Could you outrun him ever?
Oh, no, never.
So he's always been pretty fast?
Oh, always.
I thought maybe there was a time where you peaked before he did,
No, never.
Do you remember the first time you saw your byline in print? And if so, do you remember what the story was, the publication?
Oh, I do.
Do you?
I do. Well, I was the editor of my high school paper.
Okay.
And I was the editor of the yearbook. But the first time I felt like outside of high school, it was here. I was a junior going into my senior year, and Professor Adams had a summer journalism workshop. And we were up here for 2 weeks, covering everything on campus, Boys State, all kinds of stuff. And that was the first time I was like, wow, outside of school. This was the first time I saw my byline.
Yeah, I don't think you ever forget that. When you're not writing books, what types of book do you like to read?
Oh gosh, I just read an incredible book by Wright Thompson.
He was with the Star?
No, Wright has done some stuff with ESPN.
Yeah.
And he's had other books on their bestseller list at the New York Times. He wrote a book called The Barn, and it's about the barn that is still standing where Emmett Till was tortured and killed. Wright Thompson lived near where this barn still exists. He grew up in that area, and it's an amazing book. I mean, he covers hundreds of years of history in it. The Choctaw Indians, Push Mataha, and his negotiations with the government and how they were losing land, and just incredible insight, incredible writing. So I'm typically reading books like that, although I recently read The Algebra of Wealth, and I thought that was amazing as well.
Yeah, The Barn, I'm going to have to check that one out. Is there a national journalist, local journalist that you've always admired? I mean, either past or present, that you've always just really looked up to?
There were many. So Leonard Pitts actually did a blurb for my book of columns. We were both working for Knight Ridder, and when he would come to Wichita, I would beg him to read, plead with him to read. And I just remember him reading one of the lines in a turn of phrase, and I just saw a little smile curl up, because it was like I was a baby standing up for the first time. But I always admired him, and Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes. And of course, I always admired Sam Adams.
Nope, that's a good group to admire. So when you come to visit, other than Suffolk Flint Hall, where's the first place you like to go? In Lawrence, yeah.
Wow. You know what? When I visit, I try to make two annual visits. One, for William Allen White Day. But I like to come here during the holidays when Mass Street is lit up. And there's no one place on Mass, but I just keep doing loops.
Yeah, holidays on Mass is a good place to be.
I like the memories and the feel of the place.
Well, Mark, I know you got a busy schedule. Appreciate your time, and congrats again on your upcoming Newspaper Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah.
And cheers to your
Oh yeah.
first little career. Thanks, Mark.
Cheers to KU.